Welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com. I'm back. Besides doing the Earning Freedom Podcast, we're also continuing with Success After Prison, which is a verbal reading of this book, Success After Prison, How I Built Assets Worth $1 Million Within 2 years of my release from 26 years in prison, and how you can succeed too. All of this content I'm designing and creating for people who are living in struggle, for people who are living without hope. And I hope that that's not you. But if you are inside of a jail or a prison, I do hope that you will take advantage of these lessons that really helped me get through 9,500 days of confinement. More importantly, help me come back to society strong. That's what my mission is all about, helping people who are faced with a criminal justice proceeding, help them come out strong. If I could get through 26 years inside, I absolutely know that you can get through whatever it is you are facing, even if it's a life prison sentence, even if it's coming back from a financial reversal, even if it's coming back from a divorce, even if it's dealing with substance abuse issues or obesity or other challenges. See, the reality is we all face challenges and struggle in life. But if we listen and learn from masterminds, from people who have faced struggle successfully, navigated their way through it successfully, we can embrace those patterns and we can do the same. That's what I learned. That's what I try and share. This is the 11th episode of Success After Prison. If you didn't hear the previous episodes, you can very easily catch up online just by searching on the iTunes network with either the Earning Freedom Podcast or Success After Prison Podcast. You can follow me on YouTube. You can get it all on my Facebook page. You can get it all on Twitter, wherever I am, I make it available publicly for free. If you need a digital copy of the book, no problem. Go to my website at michaelsantos.com, enter your email, and one will automatically be sent to you right away. So yeah, love to share this contribution. If you need to order a printed copy, of course, there are costs associated with that because I bear costs. But you can order a copy of the book or of my courses and send it to your loved ones in prison. And we're hoping that it will help those you love come back to society strong as well. Now, in the previous episode, I spoke quite a bit about how I positioned myself to have a job waiting for me. Not just a job, but really an opportunity. And because I created that opportunity very early on in my prison journey, I was able to really come back and not have to sweat the issue of giving 25% of my wages to the halfway house, which is the general rule. At least it's the rule today. There's a lot of movement toward prison reform right now. It's a good time to be anticipating that the changes that are to come. But even though changes are to come, we all bear a responsibility for our own lives, and we must sow the seeds, put in the work and build the credibility so that we are in the best possible position to take advantage of every opportunity. Opportunities that may be available for everybody, but not everybody sowed the seeds in advance, and so they failed or they missed the opportunity. So after I was in that halfway house, I'm going to continue reading now. After I'd kind of gotten myself established, I had my driver's license, I had a job, I had a steady paycheck, and I had to begin building a banking relationship. So after I received my first paycheck, I went to the Bank of America and opened my first bank account since returning to society. Now, Charles had told me that I could not apply for credit until I completed my obligation to the Bureau of Prisons. And remember, I was in the halfway house for a full year. So I would have to live in society without a credit card. But I did open a checking account and a savings account. And just to check where I stood in the credit world, I authorized the banker to run a credit report on me. And you know what? We learned that I had a credit score. Guess what it was? 0, 0, 0. I guess you can kind of expect that if you do, so much time in prison, you have no credit. You don't exist in the world. So he asked how a person of my age, I was nearly 50, how a person of my age could proceed through life without accumulating a credit score, good or bad. A good credit score or a bad credit score. And the banker, he listened with interest as I told him that I just concluded 25 years in custody and that I was living in a halfway house. That conversation opened just another opportunity for me to tell the story of my journey, another opportunity for me to influence a potential source of support. I'm a big believer in transparency. Many people, they get out of prison and they try to hide their past. I don't make a judgment on how much information an individual should reveal. I always just try to share what has worked for me. And you can determine whether this is something you want to consider. In my case, I found that total transparency always served me well. By being completely honest about my past, I've always found that people were willing to listen. And as a consequence of the record that I built, while I was inside, even bankers were willing to welcome me home and encourage me. And when I was ready to apply for credit, he assured me that Bank of America would be ready to help. So over the next several weeks, many of the seeds that I planted while I was incarcerated began to bear fruit. That's what I want you thinking about. If you are sowing seeds right now, let's just say you're at one of these prisons where you have an opportunity to work in a garden. Go sow a seed right now. Well, you don't get the fruit right now. That seed has to mature, right? And you have to nurture that seed. And if you do a good job, that seed is going to turn into a tree, and that tree might bear fruit. I don't know whether this is true, but as I recall reading when I was incarcerated, I read the story of a bamboo tree. And it was my understanding that you plant a seed for a bamboo tree, and it takes 20 years for that bamboo tree to grow. But what's happening is during those 20 years, the bamboo tree is growing roots beneath the surface of the earth. And those roots are going deep and wide. And then when 20 years pass, boom, that bamboo tree shoots up about 100 feet. Okay? Look, the reality is there's an old cliche. It says that the best time to plant an oak tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And that's the truth for your life as well. If you're sitting in struggle, if you're living in a difficult situation, the best time to begin preparing for success may have been 20 years ago. But the second best time is right now. That's what I found. And I knew that I had to plant seeds that would grow for a long time underground, growing these roots. But because I planted them, when I came back to society, I had enormous opportunities opening up for me. As I said, over the next several weeks after I met with that banker, a lot of those seeds that I'd planted years before started to bear fruit. As I mentioned in my other books, I wrote articles every day while I was incarcerated. All of those articles, they adhered to a theme that somehow related to the prison system or overcoming struggle. They helped me build interest or a brand, and I became somewhat of a subject matter authority on the issue of prison. So as a strategy to broaden awareness of my work, I asked my wife to publish those articles on a new website we created after we got married. It used to be michaelsantos.net because michaelsantos.com wasn't available. But as I built more resources, I made an offer and I bought michaelsantos.com before I got out. But initially it was michaelsantos.net, and that's where we produced our content. But she also opened for me a Facebook page when that became available. I registered my name on Twitter, in 2008, and Carol maintained all this on my behalf. But how was it that a guy in prison, no access to the web, no access to technology of any kind, I was prescient enough. And if that were, I wouldn't have known that word before I went to prison, but it really means you're looking forward. I made a study of learning words while I was incarcerated, which you can read about in my other books. But I was recognizing that technology would help me spread out and reach more people. And the more people that I could reach, the more prospects I would have for success upon release. That's what I believe. So when I read about Facebook, I insisted that my wife open an account for me. And when I read about Twitter, I registered my name at Michael G. Santos on Twitter. I started a LinkedIn account, even when I was in prison, and started contributing articles and content. I would write book reviews and publish them on Amazon. Why? Because all of that would lead into building me as an authority, somebody who could face struggle, face a challenge, and overcome it. Guess what? Just like you can. Regardless of where you are today, you can become a subject matter authority on something. And if you do the work, opportunities are going to open for you. Opportunities that you can seize and capitalize on and monetize later in your journey. You may even be able to monetize them while you're incarcerated. And there are a lot of ways to do that without violating prison rules and yet simultaneously advancing your prospects for success upon release. I walked out of prison with $85,000. Why? Was I lucky? No. I was in jail for 26 years, but I worked hard every day. And I sowed seeds, and those seeds later bore fruit, not only while I was in prison, but when I got out of prison as well. You see, while I was in the halfway house, I received an email from Vlay Kirshner. He's a news director at the San Francisco Chronicle. I got to say, it's probably one of the top 10 newspapers in the world. Certainly top 15 in the United States. I mean, San Francisco is a major city, and I was released there. And Vlay had been following me. He told me that he'd been following my work for years. I didn't know that. You see, I'm sowing seeds when I'm in prison. I'm writing articles. I'm creating value. I'm bringing something to the table. And Vlay turns out to have been an editor at the San Francisco Chronicle. And because he's an editor at the San Francisco Chronicle, he's got enormous influence. And that influence can later be leveraged into opening new opportunities. And that's exactly what he did. Vlay Kirshner wrote me a letter, and he asked whether I'd be interested in the newspaper writing a profile about my return to society after a quarter century in prison. Well, I got to tell you, that phone call with him was the start of a magnificent new journey. I'd only been free for maybe a week when I got the call from Vlay. And we coordinated an arrangement, and he was the editor, so he assigned a journalist to come visit me. His name was Sam Whiting. And Sam came and interviewed me. He interviewed my wife. He interviewed my Lee. He interviewed some of my mentors who were at Stanford and Berkeley to make sure that I was the real deal and to really flesh out a great article. And so those conversations led to the interview and then a front page story that ran in one of the most highly visible newspapers in the world. And the San Francisco newspaper published the article on Thanksgiving weekend, about 100 days after I transitioned into the halfway house in 2012. And it appeared on the front page of the newspaper. So I may have just gotten out of prison, and I may have had more than 25 years of prison behind me and still nearly a year of halfway house time in front of me. But with that article, I had more publicity. You couldn't buy that publicity for $1 million, right? You can't buy your way into a front page newspaper article where you are above the fold, the person that the newspaper is relying on to sell newspapers on a very important weekend. I mean, Thanksgiving weekend, people are generally home, reading the paper, and it's online. And it was a big, powerful article, had nothing to do with my crime. The article did not focus on my crime or the decades that I served in prison. No, it focused on the efforts that I had been making to build a career around my journey and to come back to society as a law-abiding, contributing citizen. And the article brought so much publicity that it validated my work. And a person couldn't buy that type of coverage. And I intended to leverage that type of coverage. And I intended to use that article in ways that would open new opportunities. You see, everything is a methodical plan. With every opportunity, if you seize it, if you take the right initiative, you can use that for something else. And as a consequence of that newspaper story, people would judge me for the way that I responded to my lengthy prison sentence, rather than the bad decisions I began making when I was 20. So those who choose to live transparently, authentically, they may find that this strategy would advance their prospects for success. If that's you, I don't know. All I am telling you is this is what worked for me. This is what I learned from masterminds: to be transparent, to be authentic, to live with a strong drive in your stomach, to be passionate, to have discipline. These are the virtues that will help you transition from a life of mediocrity into a life of success, regardless of what you've come from. It doesn't happen by accident. It requires a methodical plan. And if you pursue it with passion and energy and discipline, you will achieve more than anyone around you, more than what anyone expects. It doesn't happen by accident. So I urge you to take this lesson and figure out, how can you use this in your own life? How can you begin sowing seeds today for a life of prosperity tomorrow? If you ask that type of question, you too may find opportunities around you, wherever you are, to begin saying, okay, success for me is not going to come today. I don't plant a seed and an apple seed, a seed for an apple tree, and expect to be biting into a delicious apple this afternoon. That's not how it works. This is work, right? You plant the seed, then you nurture the seed. Then you got to put all types of what do you nurture with? Fertilizer. What's fertilizer? Crap. So you got to deal with a lot of crap while it's sowing its seeds, while it's growing. And you deal with this crap. And you make it happen, and you use it, and you water it, and you nurture it every day. And when weeds grow around it, what do? You pick those weeds. And you make sure that you're coddling this recipe that is so important for your life. You're nurturing it. You're grooming it. You become vested in it. And when you do that, you are positioning yourself for strength. You are positioning yourself for prosperity. That's my message for you. That's what the Earning Freedom message is all about. You see, success after prison, it begins with the decisions that you make while you are in prison. Success after bankruptcy, it begins with the decisions that you make when you're in bankruptcy. That's the whole point here. The only difference from what I'm saying, and I am not saying anything that hasn't been said before, right? You've got 1,000 people, 10,000 people who are far more articulate than I can ever hope to be, who are far more eloquent than I can ever expect it to be, who have far more influence than I ever will have. The only difference is I am somebody like you, somebody who's been through struggle. I have walked through puddles of blood. I have been in prison for 26 years, and I can walk into any room now and be taken seriously. Why? It's because of those decisions that I made while I was in prison. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do right now. Start sowing your seeds. Start thinking about how the relationships that you make inside of those walls are going to relate to your prospects for success. If I adapted to the prison environment and used the prison vernacular when I was incarcerated and referred to everybody as, hey, what's up, homie? Talk to people like that. I can tell you one thing. May have endeared me to the prison population, but a man like Lee never would have spoken to me because he would have seen me as somebody who felt it was very important to be part of the prison movement or the prison culture. And he wouldn't have wanted somebody in his company that way. So I am telling you that if you're in a population of more than 50 people, right? If there are more than 50 people in the institution where you're being held, you are with some people of influence. You might not know who they are. They may not even know who they are. I can tell you a story. With my book, Inside Life Behind Bars in America. It was published by St. Martin's Press, which is a big New York publishing house, and it had great distribution. But I could still do more while I was incarcerated. And how did I do it? I was very proud to be able to write this book, and I really believed that this book would have an influence on my life after release. And I would ask people, who do you know that's of influence that I can reach out to? And one of the guys that I knew, his sister happened to be a photographer for the New York Times. And I said, do you think I could write her a letter and tell her about my book and she could influence it to somebody else on the New York Times and maybe they would look at my book and write about my book. And this is all way before the book even came out. Actually, I think it was toward the end, just before it was coming out. He said, sure. So I wrote a letter, gave it to him. He sent it to her. She wrote a letter then to the editor, because she knew him personally, of the New York Times Sunday Book Review, which is the most prestigious Sunday book review in the world, I would say. If you get reviewed in the Sunday New York Times Book Review, you got massive exposure. Good or bad, it's awesome, right? And she wrote him a very personal letter saying that her family had used some of my articles to help them cope with the sadness of their brother going to prison, and that I had a book coming out, and she suggested that they review the book or they look at the book, and if it's worthy of review for them to do it. It was published by St. Martin. Dude, I'm telling you, it was the most awesome day when I got the New York Times and my book was reviewed on a big page, because it's hard to do. It's my understanding that there are more than 250,000 books a year submitted to the New York Times Sunday Book Review, and they review fewer than, I think it's 2,000. So to be reviewed by them, it gave me enormous credibility. And how did it happen? Did it happen just because I asked that guy to send his sister? No. Remember, first I had to go to school and get educational credentials. Then I had to get mentors behind me. Then I had to learn how to write well enough to get published in articles. Then I had to find a way to get a book published. Then after getting some academic book published, then get a literary agent. Then get St. Martin's Press to sign me a deal. Then when a book's coming out, then I get a mentor to connect me to the New York Times. You see, it's step by step by step by step by step. That's the message of success after prison. That's the message of success through a struggle. That's the message for you. So I hope that this communicates to you. I hope that you will work through this process with me so that you too can emerge successfully. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com. If you're listening to this in the world on iTunes or YouTube and it's free, please do me the favor and support my brothers in prison by simply subscribing to the show, rating and reviewing the show so that it gets more distribution, sharing the show with a friend. And, that's the way we get moving. If you want to listen to previous episodes, they're free. Just go back to iTunes or YouTube and the Earning Freedom podcast or the Success After Prison podcast, and you can listen to them in sequence. Or just subscribe to my newsletter at michaelsantos.com, and you'll get an automatic digital book sent to you for free. If you want to order a softcover copy, then you're going to have to pay for that because I got to pay for that. But you can order it through my website or order it on Amazon, and we'll ship it to your loved one in prison or whoever, and try and inspire them. Really look forward to sharing the next episode with you. I am Michael Santos with Michael. I'm Michael with michaelsantos.com and the Earning Freedom podcast, Success After Prison podcast. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.